It's a great pleasure for me to be here in Oslo as well for the first time. Having met with Norwegian legislators last November in Charlottesville, Virginia, it was pure delight to learn, first by research, but second now by experience, having been here a few days, the similarities between Norway and countries in East Asia, especially Taiwan, where I'm originally from. The map shows you, as Harry mentioned, the situation that he described has created an impossible, untenable situation in Asia Pacific. You can see Southeast Asia is probably the most important region now under threat in terms of being sandwiched between Chinese market, economic opportunity, and of course, US protection. And the ability for these countries to work together is very, very low, especially in East Asia, where South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, of course, have historically had a very, very complicated relationship with China. On this map, you can see the colors connotate whether they're US-leaning or China-leaning. Even before Trump 1.0, the region was already very polarized. And this is, of course, with the encouragement of the United States for the last 30 years. Closer to 40 years since reform and opening in China, the markets have been integrated with China. And of course, these high-income societies that spend decades after World War II trying to become high-income and being successful at not only economic growth, double-digit, but reducing inequality. That was the true miracle until all of these countries democratized and became, of course, high-tech focused economies that are now the linchpin of the world in the next stage, whether it's AI, quantum, space, low orbit economy, and robotics. So let's take a look at these smaller Asian economies, which were relying on the rules-based global trade and open domestic markets. These are no longer the default condition for economic growth. And I say all of them are in what we call the high-income trap. After spending 4 or 5 decades becoming prosperous, what have they done for their people? And what is the meaning of being prosperous if you can't afford the citizens the opportunities they need and the benefits for the second generation? So, marked by aging population, Japan, Taiwan, South Korea's average age is 49, 45, and 44. Norway is 39. There is almost no immigration in any of these countries, at least not open immigration, only marriage would allow you to naturalize. And also, if you look at inequality, compared to Norway, it's already much worse. But still, in the scheme of things for high-income societies, these countries actually are doing quite well. Between 0.33 and 0.38, Norway is exceptional at 0.279. But if you think about China, the United States, are all well over 0.4. So the inequality situation is worsening in the last 30 years of democratization for South Korea and Taiwan, just as the market opened up. Politically, it's democratized, but economically, actually, fewer people have actually rights. And lastly, of course, the resilience of the economic and political institutions have been tested over and over again in the last 10 years. If you look at South Korea and Taiwan, household debt as a percentage of GDP is over 90%. It is not sustainable. And for the younger generation, more people are living at home without the ability to obviously accumulate asset, and therefore they're not having children, they're not getting married, women are being better educated, and this entire demographic shift, of course, mirrors some of the country, like China, that is getting old before it's even getting rich. Politically polarized, one more thing about the region before I turn to the hotspot, of course, and the topic of concern today, Taiwan. If you look at it politically, the problem that I just described is now very much at the forefront. South Korea, the courts have just declared that President Yoon has been impeached, and an election is coming up. This President Yoon, of course, was impeached after declaring martial law for the first time in 44 years. In Japan, the upper house is having an election. Prime Minister Ishiba has just entered another financial scandal. So the situation in Tokyo is also very unstable. And finally, Taiwan. Taiwan government is very divided after actually a third term by the US-leaning and autonomy or independence-leaning Democratic Progressive Party. When the third term, the parliament actually has no majority. No party has a majority in the parliament. Therefore, every single bill that is trying to increase defense spending in Taiwan, which is absolutely essential to making the society resilient against China's threat, the bill has been defeated over and over again because there's a parliament that is not functioning. What does this all mean? Well, in some ways, it's still quite remarkable. Taiwan is today the happiest country in East Asia and one of the happiest in Asia Pacific. And of course, it is very progressive. A third of our parliament are filled by women. And the society, of course, now there's 2 other countries that have joined, but Taiwan was the first country also to legalize same-sex marriage in Asia Pacific. Overall, it's remarkable. However, closer integration with China means that while the US wants to decouple, and here I want to turn to tariff for a moment, for a country that is not a country, that is very important to the United States has imposed a 32% tariff on Taiwan, and the semiconductor industry is exempt. But only after our leading semiconductor company, TSMC, actually announced that it would invest $100 billion in the United States just a few weeks ago. So you can imagine what this means is that the rest of the society outside of the tech industry has to manage, has to pay. And there's a saying in Asia, of course, America's resilience on Taiwan dollars. And basically, Taiwan is going to be asked to increase its defense from 2.45% to 3% to possibly 5%, and Trump has openly said 10%. What does this mean? 2.45% of Taiwan's GDP is already 20% of its national budget. So if you were to double it, that means the aging society will no longer have healthcare, education, and many, many other things would have to be compromised. And that, of course, is impossible for a democratic society, for any of the politicians to be able to do that. Now, Taiwan's case is particularly revealing because Taiwan society has been grappling with how best to safeguard security, sustainability, economic well-being, and all of this is very important at the same time, the long term and the short term. And I think Norway is able to appreciate this best of all the countries in Europe. Now, if you look at the surveys, over 40% of Taiwanese say, yes, we need to increase defense and hew closer to the United States. But another 30% says, wait a minute, maybe that's not the way to go. US is not coming to the aid, and whatever happens, China is still our most important neighbor and our most important trading partner still to this day. Over 30% of Taiwan's trade is with China. So what does this all mean? Well, I think it's very important to look at the future. As I mentioned, Taiwan empowers the world's technology with over 92% of the advanced chips being produced on the small island, even though that there's a huge investment in Arizona, in Dresden, Germany, in Kumamoto, in Japan. It is very unlikely in the short term, at least I would say before I retire, that you will see most of the advanced chips coming out of the United States, if at all. And so many people believe that TSMC's investments into Arizona is merely to fulfill Trump's idea that he should onshore manufacturing. But what does it really mean in terms of Trump's plan? I believe Trump's ultimate plan, while he's trying to onshore manufacturing, the most important plan is to decouple technology from China. And if China is going to be completely marginalized in the most important technology race, and Taiwan is secure for the United States, I think the real issue is where would Europe, where would Norway go from here? How do you become one of the most important countries in the world in terms of making your society more resilient, strengthening your democracy, making your markets more competitive, and the next generation having a lot more to look forward to? I think Taiwan's experience reflects the challenges faced by many other countries, and it offers a lens to Norway as to how to move forward in looking at investment, in risk, and moving forward in a decoupled age. I've run out of time, but I was going to say one word about my experience in China. 35 years ago, I was sent to China by investment banks in the United States. As a young banker, we tried to privatize state-owned enterprises in China. There was no market. We created stock exchanges in China. There had been no experience in accounting or stock exchange, but all of that was created. The miracle was incredible. But the real miracle, as my husband would always say, is that China not only developed economically, it was able to do this all within the one-party system, unwavering in supporting the one-party system. And so after 35 years, of course, it is unsustainable. The market now is fractured. There's no domestic consumption. We just came back from a trip to Tokyo and before that to Shanghai. And I think the economic and political risks, China has exposed its vulnerabilities as soon as the US policy now raising tariffs is met with Chinese retaliation. Trump now basically has raised tariffs again, threatening on April 9th to make Chinese tariffs on Chinese goods effectively 100%. What we're facing is a market, a globalized market that will actually take China out. And I think that's something that Taiwan has a lot of experience in turning into China, leaving China suddenly overnight. I think in terms of the voice of Asia Pacific, it's important to think about resilience, the trade-off in a democracy between defense, economic competitiveness, technology, and education. And that is why Harry and I created the Center for Asia-Pacific Resilience and Innovation to voice the Asia-Pacific experience, share it with the world, and we welcome you to visit Taipei when you can. Thank you very much.